Two brothers from a small town in Greater Manchester. No fashion training, industry connections, or money. But now they sit averaging around £100 million per year. But before any of that happened, they stood in a rented Paris showroom with no clothes to show, just a laptop and a prayer. Represent almost died before they even really lived. George and Mike didn't start Represent because they had a business plan. It began because they couldn't find clothes they actually wanted to wear, like how most of you start your brand. George was studying graphic design at the University of Salford. Mike is his younger brother, with a sharp eye for aesthetics. Both of them were into rock music at the time, skateboarding, and a kind of West Coast American style that didn't really translate to what was on UK high streets at the time. So in 2016, they decided to stop waiting on others and started to just put everything into their own hands and make the products that they wanted to wear themselves. The two brothers took out £1,000, which was their entire budget, and spent it on 50 blank hoodies and 50 caps. Then, instead of sitting on a product that looked like everyone else's, they stayed up all night running them over a cheese grater to get that raw, distressed texture that was trending at this time. And there was no factories that was being used, no technique required. Two guys in their bedroom destroying perfectly good hoodies and just figuring it out as they go. This is the part people get wrong about trends. Most people think riding a trend requires a budget, leverage, or timing you can only get by already being inside the industry, right? The Heatons prove the opposite. A trend doesn't care who executes it. It cares whether the execution is convincing. And two people inside of a room with a cheese grater and a clear vision of exactly what they want can be the corporate product team that's 3 steps removed from the culture every single time. The product ended up selling. What happened next is the part of Represent's story that gets glossed over in the headline versions every single time, right? George and Mike weren't fashion designers. They weren't entrepreneurs. Just two guys who accidentally started a brand and now had to figure out how to run one. So they did what most self-taught founders would, which is to keep going on, failing time after time after time again. But George eventually ended up teaching himself Photoshop, and the two of them ended up figuring out screen printing and learned manufacturing by trial and error. They built a pattern cutting table in their family's backyard shed and bought used industrial machines online so they could prototype in the house. They learned production not by taking courses, but by wrecking shit and fixing them and ruining the pieces again. This slow, unglamorous process gave them an obsessive understanding of what goes into a garment, and the results started to show up. Their AW13 campaign, Ghosts, got picked up by hypebeasts and hides nobody. Foot Asylum came calling and started stocking the brand. The crazy thing though was Justin Bieber during his Manchester tour ended up finding out about them, and he wore their pieces for the rest of his tour, right? None of this happened because of a PR strategy, but more so because they built something people actually wanted to wear. By the time their autumn-winter 2023 collection came around, the waiting list had reached 175,000 customers. And here's the part you should learn from. For years, Represent had a quality consistency problem. This wasn't because George and Mike didn't care about quality. That's literally the only thing they cared about, to keep it a buck with you. It was because finding a manufacturer who could actually deliver on their standards repeatedly at a specific scale turned out to be one of the hardest problems inside the business. And they went through around 10 different manufacturers over several years. Each time they found someone who seemed capable, they would place an order, receive the product, and then they would notice something would be off, whether if it was the weight, the wrong wash, or the construction. This is a nightmare experience, and they had to endure this with the factory. For anyone that's consumers, this is what customers don't see behind the scenes. All they would see inside their eyes is inconsistency and what arrives at the door. A bad factory doesn't just cost you money on a specific order. It costs you the customer's trust. And inside this industry that we all in, where people are paying a premium precisely because they believe in what you're selling, trust is the entire product. One bad hoodie that doesn't hold its shape after 2 washes doesn't just lose you a sale. It loses you the story a customer was telling themselves when they bought it. Also, if you need help finding a factory, factory and you want to make sure your bulk orders don't become a loss, there's a link down low that you can sign up to so we can work with one another and get your quality exactly the way you want it. But understanding a problem and solving it are two totally different thing, and the Heatons understood this. And then this Paris thing happened. So in 2019, Represent rented a showroom at Paris Fashion Week. This is the room where buyers make decisions, where stockers decide whether to carry your next season, and even where relationships with the industry get built or not get built. What will happen is you would bring your best product, you make your case for why they should buy your collection of pieces, and for a brand like Represent, who was still building at the time and just trying to prove themselves at an international level, this was a significant moment for them. But the worst thing that could have ever happened did. Their samples did not arrive. And I know you might be like, yo, that shit would be like one of the worst case scenarios. Think about what this means. You paid for a showroom and flew out to Paris. Buyers are showing up expecting to see this collection, right, y'all? And you're standing inside of an empty room with a laptop showing computer renderings of clothes that don't exist in front of you. I ain't talking about prototypes, I'm just talking about literally renderings. Digital mock-ups made on PSD files, y'all, pixels. The buyers left and no one that was there at that showroom bought their products. Relationships that might have been built did not become. And George and Mike flew home with a problem they couldn't have spent their way out of. It's easy to romanticize this kind of setback from the outside. The recover story always sounds inevitable in retrospect, but if we just living through the eyes of these two guys, this was a brand that had already been through 10 manufacturers, and they had just humiliated themselves on the biggest stage. What came next was brutal. They had to end up cutting course, gave up their office, and just went home. They just started to hand dye t-shirts in batches of 20. This is the part of the story George and Mike have talked about publicly. This period of stripping everything back to the most basic unit of what they were doing. No infrastructure, no team or overhead, just the two of them dyeing garments one after the other. Later on, they will call this time a blessing. It's a strange thing to say about what was by any measure of failure, but the reset forced them to look at every part of the business without the momentum of growth to paper over the cracks. When you're moving fast and things are working, you can tell yourself that problems aren't that serious. When you're dyeing shirts in batches of 20, you can't avoid the truth about what needs to change. As y'all heard, they went through multiple manufacturers trying to find one that could deliver consistent quality, because what looked good once does not mean it could be repeated at scale. And that's the real shift they had to make. Not about finding a factory, but one that could hit the same fit, the same fabric, and finish every single time. Because once customers start buying more than once, they gonna notice the little things. Think about it, if one hoodie fits different from the last, or the materials suddenly feel off, you may lose them forever. So it was only right that they moved the production to a better place, focused on high quality manufacturing, and tighten everything around them consistently. And this is what actually allowed them to scale. So they had that mindset shift. That search eventually led them to a Chinese manufacturer that also produced for a Cold War. If you guys don't know, that's Samuel Ross' old brand, and I'm actually gonna have that video linked at the end too, so you can watch that when you're done. Not only did they work with Samuel Ross's brand at the time, this was also Kanye manufacturer. So this kind of facility already understands what A1 quality means, because it produces for brands that won't accept anything other than that. And this partnership changed everything for them. Of course, obviously, this ain't no Cinderella story. It wasn't overnight, but it gave Represent the foundation they'd always been building towards, which was consistent quality at scale. So now if we fast forward to 2022, right? George and Mike did something that captured exactly who they were building Represent for. They took a double-decker bus, wrapped it in the brand, and went on a week-long tour around the UK, city to city. The bus became this mobile pop-up shop, and it was a way to bring the brand directly to the community that had been supporting it since those early Instagram days when it was a PayPal account and a big cartel page. I ain't talking about no department store or traditional retail setup. It was just the brand, the road, and the people. This is the type of move that doesn't make sense as a short-term business decision, but it makes complete sense as a statement about what Represent is. You don't build 175,000 people on a waiting list through advertising. The only way you gonna build it, realistically speaking, especially inside the streetwear space, is by giving someone something tangible inside their hand they can identify with. So here's what Represent Story actually teaches. Things like cheese grater hoodies aren't just clever, alright? It's a proof of concept that how much money you start with is almost as irrelevant compared to how clearly you see what you're making and why. The ugly samples, late nights, hand dyeing, all of that was the brand being scrappy on its way to something even better. This was creativity. This is that startup energy. This is exactly what the brand meant. The work ethic, the standards produced at this time before the product even existed. You could even look back to that Paris disaster, and everything that followed could have ended the story in a glimpse of a second. But instead it became the chapter that made the rest even possible. Because going back to basics is a moment they actually figured out what they need to do, improve on, and iterate. If you want to build something real, honestly just start with what you can do right now at this very moment. I'm not talking about what you'll be able to do once you have the budget, team, or factory. Especially with the times that we in today with the world and how it's going, you gonna have to be scrappy with it. I'm telling y'all, the late nights, ugly samples, are the prices you gonna have to pay to get the good part. And trust me, there is a good part. But during this stage, this will be where you find out whether you actually believe in what you're doing or not. George and Michael believed in it. £100 million brand later. If you want to see how a Londoner built his brand from the ground up with no contracts, money, or even a fashion skill set, you might want to watch this video next.